Hey everyone, this is the Love of Cinema podcast. We like to talk movies. If you like to talk movies too, you come to the right place.
Like even a film like Enenu Payam Tota, if you see, there's so many scenes where Dhanush and Megha are framed in extreme, close shots. The whole frame is their faces. And I generally believe that every face is a good-looking face. You can't really categorize faces as good-looking or okay-looking. I believe once you brought everybody into your film and your frame, they're all beautiful faces to work with. So why not go really up there and show them is just my logic.
It was the mid-90s when I fell in love with Rahman's music. Rahman's music led me to discover Tamil cinema. Ever since then, I've always enjoyed watching Tamil films. If there is one regional language cinema, besides Marathi, which happens to be my first language, that I've tried to follow closely, it's probably Tamil cinema. I find Tamil language cinema full of style, character, emotion, and vigor. One of my favorite filmmakers working in Tamil cinema today is Gautham Vasudev Menon. I believe he's a storyteller who has a very punctuated style, and his stories always pack in a lot of those elements I mentioned before: style, character, emotion, and vigor. This is Himanshu, and you're listening to the Love of Cinema podcast. But before moving on, like always, a quick request to all listeners of the podcast. If you enjoy organic conversations centered on Indian cinema, Love of Cinema podcast was created for people just like you. So do consider subscribing. Independent podcasts like this one don't have a platform ecosystem for amplification and distribution. Independent pods rely on amplification through its listeners. So if you like the episode, please do spread the word on social media. Also, do take a minute to review and rate the podcast. That would be much appreciated. Back to today's episode. Like a lot of folks outside the Tamil-speaking world, my introduction to Gautham's films was through Rehna Hai Tere Dil Mein, the Hindi language remake of his debut film, Minnale. RHTDM, as it is frequently referred to, has grown into somewhat of a cult film over time. A romantic drama with a stellar soundtrack that has had its share of criticism and has been winning over fans over the years. I was delighted to have Gautham on the podcast to chat about RHTDM as it turns 20. Can't wait to share with you all the anecdotes he shared around RHTDM and its making. Of course, we talked about a lot more besides RHTDM. Gautham shared cool stories around working with Rahman on Thalli Pogathey and Aaromale. He also talked about his writing, the use of striking closeups in his cinema, his approach to shooting songs, and finding the middle ground with respect to cinematic style when working with big stars who bring in their own style. And I also got a chance to ask him about Dead Poets Society and his favorite sequence from Naikan. Here's our chat. Hey Gautham, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you.
Thanks so much, Gautham, for coming on the podcast today and talking with us. So, Gautham, you have made a wide variety of films. Very few tell stories straddling the genres of action and romance, as well as you do. I wanted to start by asking you about the secret behind consistently succeeding in not just straddling, but also blending these two very distinct genres.
Successful, I don't know. That's a relative term. See, for me, everything is experimental. I love the organic way about which I go about my work, even though I'm saying it myself. So it's not a plan to make something because that's what's working or that's what I'm comfortable with. It's what comes from the heart. What writing comes from the heart, and it's the genre that I decide. Okay, let me just go with this because I feel good about this writing, about 50% or 60% of the writing, and I'm thinking, can I just start filming this? And then I leave the climax sort of open, so that I just wait to see what the actor has done to my character, what I myself have done to those characters, and how much I have drawn from the script to make the film myself. And then I like to shape the climax accordingly. And in that process, over the past 20 years, I think I've, to use your term that you used, straddled both these genres, love, and then I've brought in action also. It's what's naturally come from the heart. Have I made a standalone comedy film where the genre is, comedy or slapstick? No, but I thought my characters have a lot of humor in them, and when they talk, going by the response that I've got from the theaters, while watching my own films and all that. So it's been a journey for sure, but it's completely experimental with no idea as to what the reach will be like and how people will get it. I've been through the process with the audience when the film releases, and not so much with the reviews and the criticism, because I don't really care for that, and I've not read a good review, or I've not read a review in a long while. Actually, even other films, I don't base my watching a film on whether I've read the review or not, what the review has to say. With all due respect to them, I prefer to do it myself, or give the film the feel that I think it deserves. So everything is experimental in that sense, Himanshu. I've just gone about it that way, and I wait for the reaction. I get the vibe from the audience, I get the vibe from the producer, and it's mostly been good. There have been a couple of misses, but nothing which has driven me away from making the next film.
Gotcha. But are these two genres favorite of yours, or are these the kind of films that you like to watch in terms of the genres?
No, I watch everything.
Everything.
I'm so much into fantasy and horror, but I still have watched some of these films which have these genres. But it's the writing that takes me forward. And I thought, over the past couple of years, I've been thinking maybe I should venture into certain other areas, and I've not been so inspired. And I don't force my writing. So I have collaborated with a couple of other writers. Right now, I'm making a film with Simbu, which I know, from my own writing, it wouldn't have come out at all. So I've collaborated with the writer, and I'm taking his writing forward, and I'm giving it the vision that I think the writing deserves. So I am open for collaborations, and that's what I'm doing right now.
Right. Your films always have great music. You like to experiment. You like to crank up the quirk. You like to crank up the emotion with the music. I remember you mentioning somewhere in an interview I read or watched somewhere that you write your songs into the script, like you literally write in the visuals. Yeah. Can you talk about that process, giving an example perhaps from Vinay Tandi or RHTDM if possible?
I think every film of mine, yes, I can give you an example, but every film, while writing the script itself, while the script is unfolding and before it gets to be filmed, I write the music in, as in only if I feel this particular sequence can be told lyrically, I go about writing the song. I don't force a song, and I've never left a script by saying love song and move on to the next scene. I've always sort of figured out and written, like, these two people meet on the terrace, and a series of montages, where he meets her in a supermarket, and he takes her on his bike after picking her up from work. They go to this terrace, which is right above, their own house, and nobody knows that they're there. They sit in a corner there and they hold hands. And this is told also, the lyrics are written in English in most of these scripts, So, and then when I translate it into music with the music directors or the composers, when I tell them, I don't just tell them I want a love song. I give them the exact meaning and depth of why that song needs to be there, what the song is about, what the lyrics are about. And I also, to a large extent, mention what kind of genre the song could be in, in terms of music, without getting into their space. But this is how I see it. So when a lot of explanation and talking goes into making a song, I think the song will stand out, is what I feel, is the answer to your particular statement about, songs have always been good in all my films. I'll take that compliment. But there's a lot of work that goes into it.
And could you give us an example of that process where you said you write in the visuals?
So, for example, like let's say Vinay Tandi Varvaya, once Simbu Karthik meets Jessie at, after her wedding, at her house in Kerala. He jumps over the wall and then he comes to the balcony and on the veranda, and they have a conversation. And she tells him that she's always been in love with him, but she was really afraid to, take anything forward. And that's why she called the wedding off and all that. And he stands there very flabbergasted. And he said, that's all I needed to hear. I'm leaving. And from there on, the script was written completely as a musical piece, where, from there he says bye to her and he jumps over this wall and you can see the moon in the backdrop. And then he's on this boat and, he's standing there and taking the whole aura of the meeting with her and what she said. And his, the cameraman friend is there also on the boat, wondering, if they're going to get caught and everything. And then she comes to the edge of the water and she looks on as, he goes away. And then she's also reveling in the moment. And then we cut to, she walks down from, they look at each other from the gate and from above, and then she walks into his house and sneaks into his room. So all these were written as montage shots. And I also wrote, that the song can accompany these, visuals. And the lyrics could be something like, can I get back to you? I kept you at bay and all that. It was Rahman sir who came up with the idea of her saying sorry. The song Manipaya plays out here. So Rahman sir said, I've kept you at bay for so long. Can I apologize to you? So will you forgive me for that? So he brought in that element when he heard this. So once you inspire somebody so much, he gets the visuals so clearly and entrenched into his system, into his heart and everything. Then that's when your suggestions like this also come up, So, and I remember this particular song, Rahman sir said, okay, we'll work on a song here. And you leave, he said. So I left. And then without telling me, he called the lyricist and asked her to write these particular words. I didn't even know the song was being composed. And then 3 days later, I get a call from him saying, come over, and he gave me the song on a platter. And it was meant to surprise me. Yeah.
Awesome. That's an awesome story. Yeah, that's very interesting because this is like a storyboarding process that you're going through for the songs as well in your mind, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Gautham, you have worked with the biggest of stars, and most big stars have a certain style that they don't like to deviate from too often. You as a director have a very punctuated style too, if I may say so. As a director, how do you go about finding the middle ground when you're working with huge stars like Kamal, Dhanush, or Surya?
I think it's always been middle ground, and I've been very lucky, I think, because it really takes a lot to sort of break the ice around them, right? It does. They want to be in a certain zone and they want to know what the script has, particularly for them, and if it's driving their next film also forward with this particular film in that sense. So it's always dependent on what the star or the actor wants. I've somehow most of the time broken away from that and tried and kept it very middle ground. Like Kamal sir in Vettiyadu Vilayadu was very, very middle ground. I let him, obviously he's a tremendous actor. So you let him be in that space, but somewhere you keep telling him this is what you want. Like, say, with Surya, it's always been comfortable. He's always, he completely gives himself to you. He just says, okay, what would you do here? How do you want me to play this? And then can we do like a couple of more takes and all that? I try and get a very organic, raw first take and I try to crank that and move on. Print that and move on. But then he's always very sure that he wants to try out a couple of more options and stuff. With Simbu, it's a very, very organic process. We discuss a lot and then he says, let's just try a take, no rehearsal. And that take I grab and then we move on to the next shot. It's always a very single take sort of thing with Simbu. So I've been lucky, I think, to sort of find a middle ground, with some of the bigger actors, I think. Yeah.
Your experience, has it been easier to kind of push big stars that you're working with out of their comfort zone, or you kind of try to mold your style around, what they're bringing to the table?
No, I push them a lot. Okay. Works both ways, but I think it leans more towards me pushing them to sort of come into my zone. Which is why, with all due respect, Vettiyadu Vilayadu will look very different from what Kamal sir normally, even to use the word normally is like is blasphemy with Kamal sir. But I'm just saying, if you know what he does, and then if you see Vettiyadu, there's a difference in that performance. So I've been lucky. I think I've just been lucky to have them come into this zone.
Right. You're also a filmmaker who likes to use close-ups as a prominent device in your storytelling, right from RHTDM to your segment from Navrasa. The close-ups are always striking. Close-ups have their positives and negatives, like most things. With a great actor, they can be tremendously powerful. On the flip side, they can also sometimes impede the emotional impact of the scene or a situation. Can you elaborate on why you often like to use close-ups as a device?
See, I think it's very challenging for an actor to be in a frame like that, and I like to challenge them. So there is a lot of discussion. The readings that we do when we get into a script, when we get into a film, and so finally, when it comes to filming, I feel an actor holds his own in that close-up. An actor or an actress, I'm saying, both of them, and various other actors or supporting cast and everybody, they'll hold their own in that close-up. And I think they like it also. In most cases, it's worked out. In that sense. Like even a film like Enenu Ki Payam Tota, if you see, there's so many scenes where Dhanush and Megha are framed in extreme, close shots. The whole frame is their faces. And I generally believe that every face is a good-looking face. You can't really categorize faces as good-looking or okay-looking. I believe once you brought everybody into your film and your frame, they're all beautiful frames, faces to work with. So why not go really up there and show them is just my logic. And I feel so much is conveyed in a close-up, in that sense. Yeah.
The reason why I asked that was that because, a lot of actors, they're good actors, but it might not be showing on their face, so to speak. Like some actors like to, quote unquote, talk with their eyes or something like that. So how do you deal with that when you're, framing in such a tight close-up? Like, because with someone like Kamal Hassan or something, it can work wonders, right? And but if you have I don't want to say a lesser actor, but let's just say a younger actor, a less mature actor. How would you go about that?
No, I think also these close-ups are only if I feel that that particular emotion has to be conveyed, through that kind of lensing. Otherwise, if I want body language, if I want the whole body to, act in the frame, if I want to see a style, or if I want to see the way they're walking, or if I want to see some, violence, or if I want to see an outburst with a wider frame, then I go with that. Like there's a scene in Needane in Punvasandam, which is the interval block scene with Jiva and Samantha, and the Telugu version also with Nani and Samantha. It's a single shot sequence with two people meeting after some time, and then they get talking and everything. And in the process of the conversation, she comes to know that he's got his MBA admissions, in some other state. And then she tells him that I'll also come with you. But he tells her, but why would you do that? If I didn't know you want to do your MBA. She says, no, but you're going and you've gotten, so let me also try and get it. But what do you want to do? And the scene changes into, two people who love each other like crazy, getting into an argument. And then this scene ends with them actually breaking up and moving out. And they don't see each other for the next 6 years. So I decided that this is not going to be cuts and close-ups and all that. I want to see their body language. So we start filming from the time she enters the terrace and he holds her and the mood is beautiful and all that. And then slowly it gets difficult between the two of them and then they break up, right? So this is like almost an 8-9 minute sequence, which we cranked in a single shot. And I kept the camera, wide enough to show their body language. And even if it came closer, it was only to a mid-close level. And then the camera would move away and finally it moved out and all that. Now a lot of people appreciated this sequence and they also criticized this because a lot of people felt the emotion could have been conveyed better through close-ups. But my logic and my reasoning was it has to be real time without cuts, and the mood shift, the change, and finally the breakup has to come through in a single shot. And because of that, I'm just going to keep it wide and mid-close sort of thing, in one shot. So I think I've given it only what the emotion deserves and not only because I love the close-ups. I love the close-ups, yes, but it's only because the emotion works better and it has to be told a certain way.
Makes sense. I couldn't possibly have you on the podcast and not ask you about Thalli Pogathey and Aaromale. Absolute anthems. Let's talk about Thalli Pogathey first. And please excuse my mispronunciations of Tamil words. I could be wrong, but it seems like you're a fan of synth pop, new wave 80s music. I know that Rahman is a big fan of the Cars, the legendary band. Could you talk about your brief to Rahman for this particular song?
So I think I just kind of enunciated what was there in the script and what the song visuals would be like, and the moment of the script with the accident and all that. I remember talking to him very, very vividly about this accident sequence, and when they're up in the air, and the song starts and all that. And he came up, strangely for Rahman sir, um, uh, he actually played something for me, and he said, "This is not what we're going to do, but it's going to be in this style. It's going to be like a loop." He said, where the music will just, it'll be like the tung, 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 tung. So it's going to be in that loop sort of thing. And this will drive the whole song, and we'll try and do a rap and all that, he said. And then we didn't talk about the song after that for a very long time. Finally, one day he said, "This is what we're going to do." And he sat, and in his voice, he recorded this, tune, which was like so many layers and just goes on and on. It was a tune of Thalli Pogathey, and it took me and the lyricist Tamare. Normally itself it takes us some time, but this time we sat for about 5 days to crack the tune, to crack the meter of the tune, the syllables and what length it is and all that, the tanana, the tanas and all that. It took us a long time because it was in Rahman sir's voice and it was very complicated. And he kept calling it very quirky, I hope this works and all that. And we gave the lyrics to him. He loved it. We recorded it and we put out a trailer with just 1 minute of the song where the Thalli Pogathey riff comes much earlier in the trailer. Now this became really popular, but in the actual song, the Thalli Pogathey comes much later in the song. It comes after one really big mukda, and a repeat mukda sort of thing. And only then this chorus of Thalli Pogathey kicks in. So for somebody of Rahman's stature, he actually called me and said, "Gautham, the trailer's become really popular. So should I change the construction of the song and bring Thalli Pogathey earlier itself and not keep it like how it is a song?" I said, "Sir, I would love to just go with the organic way of how you compose the song." We made a cut for the trailer, but this is what the actual song was. So, with very humble request is to keep it just like that, I love the way that he was discussing, somebody of his stature was actually discussing, trying to find out if this will work. And he did call me also after a few days after the song release saying, "I know some people waited for the Thalli Pogathey to come earlier, but when it didn't come, I know they got disappointed again, again, I'm still asking you and all that." I said, "No, so let them grow with this song." It became a really big rage after that. So that particular song, the way it sounded and with the synth and all, it was completely him. It was completely him there. I didn't mention any genre to him. I just gave him a vivid description of the scenario, of the accident and how, the song plays out and all that. And he came up with that completely. And there was no way I would say no to a song like, because Rahman did ask me, "Can I give you something else, in the situation? It sounds a bit quirky to me." And all that. I said, "Sir, I'm sold. This one's the masterpiece," and it turned out to be that.
Absolutely. It's just an absolute anthem. And just one more question before we move on to Aaromale. But that transition cut, right, from that collision impact to that song, the whole thing, had you always planned it like that? Or
It was always that. It was always that. But while the film was unfolding and we were filming and we were editing, a lot of people told me on the team that this is going to be very, very experimental and quirky. Don't do this. People will be in shock. Let's give them a proper song and all that. So I tried to play around with the edit a bit. But then I decided, no, I'm just going to stick to what, like how Rahman sir, I suggest to Rahman sir, let's keep it as organic as possible because this is how you compose a song. Now for me to go around and change edit structure didn't work for me. I thought this is how the song was born. So let me give it that original feel, So it was always envisioned like that. And I stuck to it in the final edit. And that's how it came out.
Yeah, I'm glad you did because it's such a beautiful kind of a roller coaster ride, emotional roller coaster ride for the viewers. Like, you're going from that collision to this beautiful, romantic song. It's very different. It stands out, but it just plays so well with the whole music and everything. And I think that's part of the reason why it clicks so much. And for Aaromale, Gautham, what can you tell us about that hauntingly beautiful song?
Aaromale was one of the surprises from Rahman sir. Believe it or not, he called me and he said, "Where are you?" I said, "Sir, I'm here in Chennai." "Oh, Chennai, okay. Come to LA," he said. I said, "Sir, come to LA," he said. And I'm not joking. "When do you want me to come?" "Immediately." So I actually took a flight that night. He sent me an address of a place and he said, I will email you and tell you when you can come. So I stayed there for a couple of days, waited to hear from him. And then he said, "Come over to my studio." He was working on some, Hollywood films there. Some English film work was going on. So he called me in and he played me some blues guitars that he'd recorded for Aaromale. And that's the first time I heard those riffs and, those, the strains of those guitars and all. I said, so this is lovely. What is the plan with this? He said, you have this travel song, right? Where, he travels from, after Jesse and all that, he travels this whole filmmaker's journey where he revisits all the places and everything. So I have something for that situation. Only thing is, can we write the lyrics in Malayalam, because Jessie is Malayali in the film and she's not Tamil. So can we get, a famous lyricist from Kerala to write the song? And I'll also get somebody called Alphonse to sing this. So it was all planned by him. We went back to Chennai and he got this big lyricist in, and then Alphonse came in to sing the song. And the rest is, it was up to us to put that song into that place and shoot some, really good visuals. And also the film was driven to a large extent by the riffs of Aaromale, whenever Jesse appears and stuff like that. So all that is magic. It just fell into place very, very naturally and organically. And I must just thank, Rahman sir for that.
Wonderful story. Early in your career, Gautham, you, before making Minnale, you assisted Rajiv Menon, if I'm not mistaken. Today, looking back, where would you say has Rajiv Menon or any other directors whom you might have assisted left behind their influence on your style of storytelling?
I think with Rajiv sir, what I learned from him was, to go out there and no inhibitions, no holds barred sort of thing. If you're a director, like I would see Rajiv sir telling Prabhudeva how to dance. I mean, believe that or not, he would actually show, no, Prabhu, no, I don't want this. Can you give me something like this? And I actually was an introvert, I had a complex about myself and I was generally very quiet. My early stages, I'm saying, like 19 to, from the time I remember, like 10 to almost like 23, 24, I was generally in a very quiet space. I wouldn't talk much and I didn't think too much about myself. Not that I do now, I'm just saying. So I was very quiet. But I realized that if you have to direct and if you have to narrate a story and if you have to get the vision or whatever thoughts are in your head across, you have to lose inhibitions and you can't really hide behind a camera or, hide behind a wall or a pillar. So I learned that from Rajiv. I used to see him teach Kajol how to act, show Prabhudeva how to dance, correct him, say, no, I don't want this. Can you do that? Very boisterous and, all over the place. So I learned that from him completely. I'm not that at all, In fact, I'm almost like a multiple personalities or bipolar sort of thing. If you, in a good way, I'm saying. I'm really quiet and, I don't talk much and stuff like that. But on the sets, I'm like I'm completely somebody else. And I know I have to do that to get my thoughts and my work across, So, and I'm saying that with all due respect to, the term that I used with the people who are affected by that. I know it's not a fun term to, talk about, but I generally think I am two people in that sense, Yeah.
And did you assist anybody else before making Minnale?
No, Rajiv sir was the filmmaker that I worked with on the feature film. After Rajiv, I went and sort of worked with this person called GB Vijay, who used to work with Rajiv also. He's a filmmaker, but he worked on that one film with Rajiv sir. And when he branched out and set up his own production house to make ad films, it was just me and him. So he would let me do everything. So I learned a lot from him also. Like he would let me go and handle the actors and fix the production plan and all that stuff. So it was just me. And I used to work only with him. And it was just the two of us that ran the entire show for almost a couple of years. So there was a lot of, hands-on experience that I learned from Mr. Vijay.
Gotcha. So Gautham, RHTDM, Renayatare Dil Mein, turns 20 next year. This year, in a few days. The film and the soundtrack has a cult following. It's, of course, a remake of your first Tamil film, Minnale. Before we talk about RHTDM more, I wanted to quickly touch on something I read on the internet. And I'm not sure if this is legit, because like most things on internet, you want to check if they're accurate first. But apparently, Madhavan wanted Mani Ratnam to hear the script for Minnale, and Ratnam heard the script and didn't like it. First of all, is that true? And
yeah, that's
true. It is. Do you remember what was Mani Ratnam's feedback?
But that's true. It's just that we'd already discussed and set up the script, and Maddie brought in this friend of his who's now a very dear friend of mine, this writer-director called Vipul Shah. He's not He's not the Vipul Shah who's made the feature films and all that. This is another Vipul Shah who's very big on television and all that. And he wrote Minnale along with me.
Right.
We discussed and set up the script to a large extent. Also, obviously, with a lot of support from Maddie. Like he's the one who actually put us together and took us to the producer. And a lot of work was done by Maddie in that sense. Once the script was ready, he just said, "I just need you to narrate this to Mani sir, and sort of let him greenlight this," because he had this other. I mean, obviously after Alipai and Alipai was just releasing and all that, he had a lot of offers, and there was another filmmaker who had pitched something to him, and he liked that. So Maddie's dilemma was whether he should do this film or that film first. So, and whether he should do this film at all, So in that scenario, he made me narrate to Mani sir, and I kept telling him, very wrong idea, because I'm not going to be able to give a good narration. Mani sir is going to hate this subject, and don't do this to me. This is like, you can't do this to me. Very unfair, I said.
Because let me pause you for a minute there. Why did you think Mani Ratnam is going to hate this subject?
Yeah, so see, firstly, because I'm not going to be able to narrate well to him. He's not going to get it at all. Secondly, this genre and the film that I wanted to make was nowhere in the league of films that Mani sir has made before, to my knowledge, I'm saying, in my head at least. And I've grown up, become a filmmaker watching Mani sir's films. Like you asked me, Rajiv sir, yes, I worked with him. I worked with GP Vijay, but the man I learned the most from without working with him, but just by studying, writing down scenes from his films, writing down the number of shots, figuring out why the camera has moved a certain way in a particular scene or an emotion. Length and breadth of every film I've studied was Mani sir's films, right? So to make me go and narrate to him was very unfair, is what I thought, But Maddie said, no, you have to do it and all that. And I went very, very reluctantly and I gave him a very bad narration. Mani sir heard it and said, oh. And then I think he's told Maddie that this is not going to work so much. I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe you should do the other film. The other film was a slightly, I won't say rural, but a small town character, very different from the one Maddie had played in Alipai, right? So I think Mani sir said, do that for a variation, for a change from what you've done Alipai. And even now, recently, when I met Mani sir, I told him this and I joked about it. And he said, good move, you didn't listen to me, he said, So, and I told him, so I've always wanted to work with you, and I've tried to meet you so many times outside your office, and your team has always met me, but I was never able to meet you. He said, you did. Yeah, I think things really worked out well for you, Gautham. You didn't work with me, and see, that's why you're a good filmmaker. That's Mani sir's sense of humor. So I've had the best of conversations with him, and I still look up to, working with him. So,
of course, yes. Now let's talk about the movie. I like how the movie starts itself with Maddie telling us about Sam. It throws you in the deep end right away without any kind of a build-up. It's also striking because Maddie isn't talking about his love interest or somebody in his life. He's talking about someone who he hates. It's a great hook. Was this something you deliberated on, or was this something that just you happened to write it?
This was brought in by Vipul Shah very clearly. See, I have a lot of voiceover narrations in my film. The script was written like that initially also, but I think the idea of this guy these two people who don't like each other was brought in by Vipulji, and then the rest of the writing just fell in place.
Yeah, that's very interesting because that when I watched it, 20 years ago, that's one of the first thing that kind of hooks you right away, and it's so different from the mainstream kind of cinema that I was watching at that time. One of RHTDM's most memorable sequences is the one where Maddie sees Reena for the first time in the rain. It's a beautiful sequence. It's raining. There are kids on the road dancing in the rain. Reena's car breaks down. Reena steps out of the car to join the kid. Haris Jairaj, beautiful score breaks in. Maddie sees Reena from the phone booth and falls for her, hopelessly, madly. It's the kind of sequence that underlines the very magic of movies, especially, if you're a teenager when you were watching that for the first time. Tell us more about that sequence.
So there's a lot of thoughts as to how to introduce this girl in the film. The initial scenes were supposed to be on a train where he's traveling and she's there, on the opposite berth, and they strike up a conversation. And it was a very ode to Pakiza sort of a thing, पाँव देखे हैं आपके बहुत हंसी हैं kind of a moment. I was very influenced and inspired by that sequence, So I thought, and I love everything about a woman's feet, So I thought I must have, feet and this train moment, but we could never get to shoot it in the original version. We went to shoot it, but it was a disastrous night. There was rain, actual rain in the film. I mean, while we were filming, and we just couldn't get to shoot because of some technical issues and logistical issues and all that. And I remember another time we tried getting on the train and we couldn't film. So twice, we tried this train sequence, didn't work. Producer was very angry and upset with us. So I decided that I would change the scene around into something else, simpler. And that's how this rain sequence came about. It came about almost towards 3/4 of completing production of Minnale, the original version, where I came up with a scene where this girl steps out of a car while the car is, the car's broken down, and then she steps out and she sees these, kids dancing in the rain, and she joins them, and he's standing in the phone booth, and it's all, fogged out and everything, and he kind of wipes it and looks at her. So this came about just like that, and then we decided to retain that for the Hindi version. We didn't even bother going back to the train. The train sequence, however, I shot in Varanamayiram much later.
Interesting, very interesting. Recently when I watched your segment from Navrasa, and when Kamal plays the last song in front of the audiences, the first thing that sprung in my mind was Saif's Dil Ko Tumse Pyar Hua with Destiny painted on the wall behind. And are there any deliberate parallels there, or that was just something that,
No, there were parallels, Himanshu. I just like the idea of a musician, a singer, a songwriter on stage, singing from the heart. Lyrics just come around, and the guitar and, a crowd and all that. So I just love that whole scenario. Like I go for a lot of gigs myself, and I just plant myself in a corner and watch these musicians, perform. So I've always thought I must recreate moments like that in many films of mine. So it's just that.
Do you play music yourself?
I'm still trying to.
The music of RHTDM has aged so well. I mean, why do you think Zara Zara and Dil Ko Tumse Pyar Hua became what they became, almost cult of their own? I mean, the film has a cult following as well. But if I were to ask you to turn back the clock and take us back to the time when you were recording these two songs with Haris Jayaraj, did you have like a special, hunch for these two songs when you guys were recording this, or?
Yeah. So when we did the Tamil version, of course, Basigara, was Zara Zara in Tamil, and it was one of the first songs that I collaborated with Thamare, the lyricist. The other songs were written by Vali, so it was like a senior lyricist and very revered and legendary and all that. He's no more. But then I wanted something else, so I discovered Thamare, so to speak. She had done a couple of songs, but we vibed really well, and she came up with Vasigara, and and we vibed really well, the work together and all that stuff. And the Dilko situation in Minnale was another song, actually, completely. When we went for the Hindi version, I suggested that to Haris that we retain Zara Zara, the tune, and for the Dilko song, we'll come up with a new tune, make it a full song, because it's Saif Ali Khan, and that's when Haris came up with Dilko. And Saif is so good, with like, it actually is like he's playing the guitar. He put so much into it, and I didn't want to lose out on that opportunity. I know what he's capable of in that sense. So, looking back now, I know the film didn't really work when it released, and later on, it kind of got that status which we'd all hoped for that it had got when the film released. But we put everything into it at that time. Saif was completely with us when I told him that, you go up on stage and you talk to the crowd and you perform and you're talking to her also. He was completely with us. There was nothing that Saif said no to, and Saif was already Saif Ali Khan, right? And I was just a newcomer director there. But it was so beautiful, the vibe and the way we worked well together and all that stuff. Those are the things that I remember right now while I'm talking to you. Actually, the whole Saif interaction was so good. But these songs, Himanshu, to answer your question specifically, there's no way these songs wouldn't have worked. When I got the tune itself, I really felt, something magical was unfolding there. Yeah.
Gautam, now when you look back on this movie, or maybe even some of your other movies, when they don't work as you expect them to, when at the time of the release, but over the time, time becomes a friend of these films, and they kind of, slowly garner a following. Do you think about that a lot, or what might have caused that, or in terms as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, or there is no real reason behind it, and that's why you don't spend too much time on it?
Yeah, it's the latter. There's no real reason behind that. There's a lot to do with the time and when you release the film and the mood that maybe the general population is in, the film going audience. It's a lot of things.
Like,
Sometimes
for
the greatest.
example, for RHTDM, what do you think is the reason now that it
Yeah,
has
I
become
think
what it is?
it's just the right time to release the film. There was Navaratri. It didn't get a big opening like we thought it would. Vashu Bagdani ji was the producer. I mean, big producer and all that. But somewhere, it was crowded when we released the film. And there was discussion as to whether we should push the release and all that. And by the third day or fourth day, he kept telling me that it's not doing well and all that stuff. So something just doesn't work. And sometimes when it has to work, there's actually no reasoning why it not be a great film or anything like that, but it'll just work. And I've seen that with a couple of films. So if I knew the answer to that, Himanshu, I wouldn't go wrong at all. Right? Nobody would go wrong. But that's this business, and that's the passion about filmmaking itself. You're throwing it out to the audience. Now you have an audience sitting at home and watching these films on OTT platforms and stuff. And the reactions and the way they react in the theater and the way they react to something watching at home is different. But finally, that vibe reaches you, whether it's connected with them or not. Navarasa itself, I know that a lot of people felt in Tamil that it's very similar to some of my work from earlier. But I know a whole lot of audience that's outside Tamil Nadu because they watch Netflix, and those who don't know me at all, they all got it, really well. I got a lot of feedback from them, saying very refreshing, musically so good, and all that. So I think the audience is evolving, and you're reaching out to a larger audience these days. So it's just good to just put stuff out there and then wait to hear from them. That's all.
Over the years, Gautam, one of RHTDM's criticism has been Reena's decision to ultimately choose Maddie over Sam, opting for someone who lies to her, stalks her, and has misplaced notions of love. Now, I know in the movie there is a scene where Maddie apologized to Reena for his ways. Also, we have to take all the criticism with a pinch of salt, as every movie is a product of its time. But what do you make of that kind of criticism?
I didn't see it as that. Yes, there was a lie, and he did impersonate somebody else. He was trying to be somebody else with her. But at a crucial time, he backed off, and he was going to tell her the truth, and then she finds out, which is why it becomes a problem. And then he's apologetic, but he would never have forced himself, or he would never have become otherwise. So he borders on that. He does lose his temper a couple of times, and he does get a little edgy. But then he realizes that, and there's a moment where he could have even taken out is a very strong word, where he could have gotten into a sort of a thing with, Saif, the character Saif played. But somehow he backs off from all that, And see, I'm not going to pass the buck here, but a lot of this writing came in once Maddie and Vipulji came into the picture. My original script didn't have all this. But then I was also okay with it in that sense. Whether we with in a different time now, and in that time there was not too much of being woke about these things at that point. But then we still were conscious about what we were doing, which is why we kept justifying, with an apology and being sorry, and then, having a chance to get into a violent scene with Rajiv Samra, the character, but then backing off also, And so I thought we kept him in a very decent space within that. And, you can't really reason with a woman's decisions, I think, with all due respect. Being a woman, I know with all my heart that she will pick only Maddie's character and not Saif, because there are some things that he's done to her heart, much before Rajiv, much before the other guy came in, So that's my only answer to this right now.
Right, right. I always saw it as a journey of Maddie's character. He starts out as someone, who's young, and he does stupid things like so many of us did, when we were young. And you kind of progress over, through the life, and your character. So that's the same kind of a character arc for Maddie, that once he falls in love, he kind of starts seeing those flaws in himself. And that's the
Yeah,
way.
and the woman's decision as to why she picked, Mary's character over Seth, I think it's not ours to reason why. That's my only answer.
Gautam, going back to Navrasa for a minute, I kind of skipped over this question, but I wanted to ask you about that particular terrace sequence, just the visuals of it. It has a very particular palette, like pastel colors and kind of a very picturesque. What was the whole thing behind that? I mean, is it just were you trying to just crank up the romance, and what was the reason behind that particular palette for that sequence?
Yeah, when we discussed with PC Sir, who's legendary, right, and
Of course,
Rajiv, the whole team, and this is about love. The attraction was the emotion, right? Navarasa, we were all handling an emotion, and mine was Shringara, and it was about attraction. So we felt the frame should also have that. There should be romance and attraction between the characters, and the frame should also have that. So all these sequences, like that gate and the house that she walks into, they're all sets, okay, but made to look like real, but then there's a surreal feel also about it. They're walking on the streets and there's a little bit of a drizzle and there are leaves falling and all. So actually there are no leaves though that exist in our country in that style, yes. But this is surreal treatment, and I was just hoping that some people would get it. Like on the terrace also, it's just against the skyline, which was created in the studio, not on post. It was created and we made them actually stand against that. But it was meant to have a surreal quality to it. And at the same time, the romance should come out from those frames is what we thought. Like when they meet in the studio also, if you see while Surya is talking to, Netra's character, Prayaga's character that she played called Netra, behind Surya, you'll see on his desktop, you'll see a color, a white band of color sort of, just falling, from behind him. And when we shot her, you'd see in the foreground, there'll be like if there was a scarf in front of the lens, there'll be like a diffuse sort of a feel. So all this was planned and thought of and discussed, and it was pieces are mostly who, came up with this magic. I'd like to call it magic because I really liked it.
Yeah, it looks beautiful. It kind of mirrors their frame of mind that they're in this spatial zone at the time.
We wanted to mirror their frame of mind. That's it exactly.
Right, right. Gautam, I know you had mentioned in one of your interviews that Dead Poets Society is one of your favorite movies. It's one of my favorite Robin Williams movies too. What do you dig about that film? What do you like about that film so much?
Carpe diem and everything about it. I think I've got an emotional attachment to the film because one of the few films that my dad, recommended that I should watch. Apart from Avara and Pyasa and Sri Charso Bees and some other films like that, he said you should watch this. So I sat down and watched this film with him, and lessons just unfold in that film. From filmmaking itself to life lessons to how friendship can go wrong and how the system can work against you, can work against a band of friends or a band of brothers. And finally, this professor and what he stands for, the way he teaches in class, small things to this is what you want to do in a school or a college, and this is how you want friendship to be like. And a lot of us go through that pressure from home, fathers or parents not wanting you to go into the cultural side of or the creative side of life. They want you to be in that mechanical zone where, you have to be corporate and you have to be working and you have to get a degree and all that stuff, So what happens to what your heart wants to do, right? And, I also equate that film to my own folks, when I did my engineering because at that time I didn't want to tell them that I have this bug in me to become a filmmaker. I didn't know how they would take it. So I just, because my mom wanted me to do engineering, so I just went ahead into engineering college and all that. But once I finished and I came out and I was mature enough at 21, I decided to tell them that this is what I want to do. I have nothing to do with engineering and I want to be a filmmaker. and I have these stories inside me, and I have these visuals in my head that I want to, put out there. And they were so supportive. They were not like, no way, and you have to pursue, your engineering and all that. And they were like, they were only thinking how to go about this now. So who do we get to meet? Who do we get you to meet? How can we. Is all they asked me, And which is so unlike, one of the characters in Dead Poets Society, where the father comes in and prevents him from being on stage, right? Which is why this whole thing starts off, So it's a film that's very close to my heart, and of course Robin Williams, all that. Yeah.
Is there any of that film where subconsciously in any of your films that might not translate directly to scenes from the films or something, but
Himanshu, I really don't know. There's a lot of Godfather in most of my films. You might not even see it, but I've seen that film like 100 times. There's a lot of Nayagan. There's a lot of Mani Ratnam mythology in some of my visuals, maybe.
Definitely, that comes across.
We're still trying to, get there. I don't think that we will.
Everybody's right. All right, Gautham, one last question, but I know it's unfair, but I'm going to hold a gun to your head. And I'm going to ask you to choose only one. You can keep only one Mani Ratnam film. Which one would you keep and why?
Nayagan, for sure, because that set me off, right? And I'm sitting here talking to you only because of that film. When I watched that film, it did something to me, and I was 16. And then I went back to the theater to watch the film without telling my folks many times over. Then I latched onto a VHS and put that film into a VCR, and I watched it many times. A pirated print, so to speak. I studied that film. I wrote down the shots at 17, 18 itself, with no idea as to why I'm doing that. And I started following, the man's work only after that film, obviously, to a great extent, to a big extent, So that's the film I picked because I think without that film, this journey, wouldn't have been possible, I think. Yeah.
And your favorite sequence from Nayagan?
I clearly remember the scenes between the father and daughter on the terrace, where she's trying to bring some sense into, why she should leave and why what he does is wrong. And he's trying to put some sense into her, saying, this is a system, this is how it works, and somebody has to stand up, and they come to me. And she reaches out and slaps, his associate, and because of that, he goes after her, in a second, the father-daughter thing is broken, and he's standing there for his friend, who's taken a slap from the girl, whom he's also raised pretty much.
Right.
Great moment that, actually.
Great moment, yes. A lot of dynamics going on there. Perfect. Thanks so much, Gautham. That's all I had. I really appreciate you taking the time today to do this chat. It was wonderful, and I wanted to do this for many days, so I'm really glad we finally got this done. And in time for RHTDM's 20th birthday next week. So I'm pretty glad about that too.
Thank you, Himanshu. You made me feel really comfortable. So I'm glad we did this, and sooner and not later.
Thank you so much.
We'll stay in touch. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, we will. Thanks a lot. Guys, if you liked the episode, do spread the word about this episode and the podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to the pod wherever you listen to your pods. Also, do drop us a review in Apple Podcasts when you get a chance. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at loveofcinemasf8. That's the episode. This is Himanshu signing off. And like always, thank you for listening to the Love of Cinema podcast.